Tuesday, and welcome back to another episode of MSL Lead Chronicles, where leaders learn from leaders. I'm Mary Morton, and along with my buddy Chad Fellers, we have casual talk about the challenges and successes in medical affairs with the most exciting and impactful professionals in pharma. As always, we have another great one for you today, so stick around.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of MSL Lead Chronicles. I'm your host, Chad Fellers, along with my nifty sidekick, Mary Morton. How are you, Mary?
I'm doing terrific today. How are you?
I'm doing really well. What does it feel like being a year older?
I was literally going to ask you that.
I know. That's why I thought I'd beat you to it. I know. How you feeling?
Old.
You and me both.
I'm not going to lie. So when we were just in Scotland, our driver that was taking us from Glasgow to another part of Scotland called Oban, she was taking us through the Highlands. It was so amazing. She said, "So Mary, what do you do? Are you retired?" Have you ever heard me speechless? I was speechless.
No.
And I didn't say anything. And then I was like, "So how old exactly do you think I am?"
That's
because
far
I like
removed.
To think,
yeah.
I like to think I don't look 57, but anyway,
well,
she caught my drift at that point.
So I told somebody that I just turned 50, and they're like, "Ooh," and I was like, "Oh, I feel so old." And they're like, "The number is really not a big deal. It's all about how you feel and how you look." And I said, "Well, I look like I've finally caught up to my hair color that I've had for 15 years, and I feel like a 50-year-old. So I don't really, I feel old in many ways, much older than what I was when I was 40. And I could tell you other stories similar to that around going to play golf and asking if I needed a senior disc, if I was a senior. That literally happened 10 years ago. I should have said yes. Should have said yes to get the discount because I was so offended, but I had no response. I really just didn't know what to say. But anyway, it's talking about things that we want to be as we get older, as we grow, things like that. Let's go ahead and transition. I think it'd be a great way to kind of tee up today's conversation about the things we want to be. And so really, what kind of leader do you want to be? It's a great topic, I think, and a great title, Mary. And it's going to be a great conversation with our guest today. So with that, why don't you introduce who we have with us?
I am so excited to introduce everybody. If you don't know her already, we have the wonderful Melissa Landis joining us today. So Melissa has a bachelor's in biology with a minor in chemistry from the greatest university on the planet, University of Texas at Austin. Then somehow she got lost on the way to grad school and ended up at A&M for her master's in nutrition. She got her PhD in pharmacology from Case Western, where one of our previous guests, Nicole Yonkers, also got her PhD, but it was in immunology. I don't know, maybe y'all were there on the same time. So before moving into pharma, Melissa was an academic faculty member, director of preclinical and translational research at a major cancer center here in the great state of Texas. And she was leading teams that were focused on identifying therapeutic targets in breast cancer. And during that time, she co-published more than 30 peer-reviewed manuscripts. That's unbelievable.
That's a lot.
That wasn't enough. After all of those amazing accomplishments, she moved into pharma, where she's now been for about 11 years, I guess. Started as an MSL in oncology, utilizing all that breast cancer research. And then she moved into a smaller biopharma that is now more of a medium-sized global oncology company. So she led U.S. early clinical development there and a solid tumor team of field medical directors. And after 6 years as a pan-tumor senior field medical director and then a senior regional director, where she was partnering with ClinDev and clinical operations. They were designing and operationalizing this U.S. early phase network that actually enabled them to have very efficient, cost-effective early phase in human studies. Um, and this is crazy. If you thought the 30 peer-reviewed manuscripts was a lot, they were able to transition 10 new molecular entities into the clinic in 1 year.
Wow.
In 1 year. So, Melissa is now the executive national director of U.S. Field Medical with Zenas Biopharma, where she is building and leading field medical teams. She's shaping the strategy, the execution, and creating the culture for a high-performing field medical team. And they are working in rare disease and immunology, so a little bit of a step away from oncology. On a personal note, Melissa and her husband Chris live in Klein, Texas. That's in the Houston area with their 2 rescue pups, Max and Harley. They love spending time together and with their kids, son, daughter, future son-in-law. They're very active. It's beach or mountains, either one. They love all of that, traveling, skiing, snowboarding, snorkeling, fishing. They are super outdoorsy hiking folks. And in the fall, she gets lost again somehow in College Station at Kyle Field for her beloved Aggies. So I could not say the thing with I can't even do the thumb.
Gig 'em.
There. Yeah.
Gig 'em.
But
I can do both.
oh, I feel I'm being ganged up on.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show, Melissa. We're so excited to have you. And before we get too far into it, as always, we have our hot seat questions. So I don't know if you got a chance to think about this, but what would your walk-up song be?
Ooh, first of all, thank you for an amazing introduction. So walk up song. Okay, I'm gonna show my age here. I'm gonna go with Bon Jovi,
Okay.
Living on a Prayer. So when I think about that, it's that like you're doing hard things together. You're not going to give up on each other, and it reflects who I am as a leader. So that's where I go. And yeah, it is Bon Jovi.
I love your taste in music. All right, go ahead. What's the next question, Mary?
Okay. Well, since we already know that you love snorkeling, what's your favorite snorkeling spot you've ever been to?
Ooh, there's so many beautiful places. The one I've been to, I would say Cozumel. And it's off at the Money Bar in Cozumel. We did a really cool thing there. It's a longer story, but we anchored my stepfather's reef ball there so we could go out to the coordinates and snorkel out there. So
Wow.
That
very
sounds
cool.
nice. Okay. And then kind of leading us into what we're talking about today, what's a book that you would recommend to every leader, future, present?
One that comes to mind, it's that was really influential for me is It's Your Ship. And it is about a Captain Overtroff, and what he did was he came in and like transitioned from that top leadership from the top down to the more servant leadership, really letting the boat lead, and they became like the number one ship from the worst ship to the best ship in the Navy. So it's a lot of great stories and examples of leadership.
So what's the name of it again?
It's Your Ship.
It's Your Ship. Okay, we'll make sure to share that with everybody too.
Melissa, this is going to be a great conversation. When you said the word around servant leadership, you definitely got my ear. So let's get into today's conversation. So as tradition here on our podcast, we like to start with the key takeaways for today's conversation. So with that, do you have key takeaways you want to leave or set the tone with?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Absolutely. So first would be that impactful leaders have a lasting legacy that's immeasurable, that have been really impactful in my life, and be the type of leader that aligns with your values and principles. And then as far as how to do so, enable, empower, develop so that a team can thrive as individuals and as a team. So hopefully as we get through our conversation and chatting, those will come to life.
Tell us about your first people leadership role. How did it come to be? And just would love to learn some of your story.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the first is probably this a bit unique because Mary mentioned that I had my academic career at a major cancer center. And so that was where I had my first opportunity to be a leader. So that was, I was faculty and was really building out this translational facility. And with that, then I had MD, PhD students, fellows, research technicians. And so I was leading them in research. And what I loved was the deep scientific conversations as we're generating hypotheses and testing those, and really all of us thought partnering. And so the thought partnering part of that was really amazing. But as I was in my academic career, I continuously gravitated towards more being closer to really getting treatments to patients. And so that's where the appeal of industry came in. And then once I've got that first MSL position, then I was hooked and I have loved it every step of the way. So more relevant as far as leadership in our conversation today about leading MSLs was as a senior regional director at B1, which is formerly Beijing. And so that was an interesting story because there I'd been on this team for 4 years as a field medical director and then was promoted into the team leadership role. So it was a great opportunity. We
Yeah.
acted as national directors, so it really accelerated that learning and leadership. So,
So I got a question right off the bat. When you were talking about leading the folks in academia, I mean, you named off some different types of people and probably a lot of different personalities, different things that drive them. Um, so and I think I hear this a lot, will my leadership experience from academia transfer into pharma? So like from that standpoint or any other standpoint, where what are some of the lessons you feel like you learned leading in academia and research that you were able to sort of immediately put into play in industry?
that's a great question. So thinking about that, I mean, the key thing in leadership, the first and foremost important thing is people and getting to know your people. So that was the thing. Instead of rushing in, okay, we've got a project, we've got paper to get done. It was really getting to know people well, and that took
Yeah.
time. So, and then also I had that transition there too from peer to faculty. And so that was an interesting lesson that I used years later. So
So was it when you went from peer to leading people who were your peers, and I don't know if it was an awkward transition or what, but do you think that's the same thing someone experiences when they're in pharma? Going from
oh yeah. Absolutely, because you still have, all the degrees, all the super smart people, the really high performing, high achievers. And so I think there's a lot of transferable lessons learned and best practices from that as well.
So I've got a follow up question. Were there any lessons learned when you were in academia, making that shift from a peer to a leader that you didn't do, or you tried something different when you made the same transition within industry? This is being vulnerable, right? I mean, I think for me, I recognize that in ways I was trying to be the best friend. I had no idea about servant leadership, and so completely different style for me. So I was just curious if you had any of those types of experiences that helped inform doing things different when you had the opportunity here in pharma.
No, it's a great point because especially when you're coming in and you're coming in with folks that are friends and peers, then really having to give feedback and really help give guidance, that can be a challenging spot. So, it was learning how to adjust and maintain those friendships, but at a different level. And then, those difficult conversations, when things weren't going so well, and those could be tough.
Conflict management is always something that it's tough. It's easier to be an observer of something like that and be as a peer and make comments about it. It's another thing to be one that has to offer like true direction on that. You mentioned becoming servant leader, right? So was there a moment you realized this is the type of leader I wanted to be? Did you learn from somebody in your experience? Did you learn how you didn't want to lead? And so that's what shaped your leadership style. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I can speak to both of those. So, and yeah, like the lessons learned, you'd say. When I was in academics, I didn't think a whole lot about the leadership role. We were just doing what we were doing, right? So there wasn't as much time spent on the thinking about it and reflection. So it was really not until I had the opportunity as a regional director, and I was in this 9 month intensive leadership training, which was great timing as trying to accelerate my growth and development and leadership, that I learned how much there was to being an
Mm,
inspiring leader, that leadership versus a manager. And so for that, as part of that, if I'm sure you have each done these and they torture you with these role play scenarios, right? So in one of these, we did these 3 like 1 week sessions in person, and they tortured us even further by dropping an assignment on us where we had to act as a new manager, new leader of a team, introduce ourselves to the team, and explain our leadership style and how our leadership style was impacted. Was there somebody? Was there, was it the who, the what of why you thrive to be this particular leadership style? And so, and it's a quick assignment. We had 3 slides, and one slide had to be one image of that impact. And so for me, as I paused and reflected, I immediately went to John Nilsson, who was the chair of our department of pharmacology. And then he was also the chair of my thesis committee.
hmm,
And thinking back through how he was so effective and how he resonated with each of us and the legacy that he left, that became well, that's a natural because he aligned with kind of my natural approach anyway, my principles, my values. And so that really led me. Let me tell you about John Nelson. He, he was fun, very impactful as a leader, but he also really took the time to get to know each of us individually.
hmm,
He's very humble. And like he'd spend hours where he'd just project his NIH grant application and then let us just rip it apart, critique it. And he's taken this from measly grad students, right? And of
uh,
course, we think we know everything at the time, but it was just that we all learned together, we grew together, and then when I spoke to, we had fun together. Then we, go whether it was a departmental retreat or if we're celebrating or commiserating a grant being rejected or accepted over dinner and drinks. He was just got in with us and really supported us. And he had this really unique ability to get to know us and know each of our strengths and our capabilities and
hmm.
help us to grow as individuals. And together we all grew as a team as well. So.
Did you ever tell him the impact he made on you or how he made you feel?
Sadly, sadly, part of why that year was actually I had just found out that he was lost we lost him to a tragic accident in
Oh,
Italy. And
Oh,
so, but the key thing that came out of that was his legacy, because as we all talked about him and we all shared memories, it was about the impact he had on us individually and then how he shaped the trajectory of our careers. And so really it's one of those, like I mentioned earlier, like you don't know it in the moment. It's those years later when people come back or you go back to those influences that you realize, you recognize the impact.
wow. I mean, and I'm sure there are, yeah, I mean, yeah, the legacy. Yeah. And you think about if a moment happens and it makes you smile a little bit because it reminds you of your experience with him. This really moved me.
first of all, thanks for sharing that story. Definitely tell it. I think we're in a day and age where things move so fast. The importance of pausing and taking a step back and reflecting on some of those things and creating intentional space for it. So with that, so you talk about the lasting legacy that he had. Can you talk a little bit more about the ways you try to be intentional of fostering that with the people that you get to serve?
first and foremost, I think of them as individuals and really spend that time to get to know them
Hmm.
and actively listening, and then also allowing them to get to know me. So
Yeah.
my being vulnerable, my sharing. So I think that's critical at building trust, and
Hmm.
trust does take time. One of you've asked about an influential book earlier. Well, I'll drop another one in there, and it's Stephen Covey, the Speed to Trust. He really gets into how trust is about character and competence. And
Hmm.
so it's really through getting to know individuals and allowing them to get to know you that they learn your character. And then also through enabling them, empowering them, that they learn about your competency as a leader.
Hmm.
So I was thinking about, we've got all these great examples of things that you would want to emulate or recreate. I don't know if anybody here watches Succession, but if you've ever oh gosh, well, the patriarch of that family, the character's name is Logan Roy, and I can tell you that that's definitely not someone that you would want to model yourself after. But um, rather than ask, was there someone that modeled poor leadership behavior that you chose, I'm not going to do it this way. Are there a couple of, two or three maybe things that you would throw out for aspiring leaders to say, if given the opportunity, don't do it X way?
Oh, absolutely. Top of mind is that authoritarian, and what I mentioned earlier is like top down leadership. And that's where just all the decisions are made at the top without any feedback or, opportunity for subordinates to really have a part in it and to form. And so I just think that's such a loss because individuals bring so much value with different perspectives, with different insights, with their firsthand knowledge of the front line, if we're sticking with kind of military terms. And so I just think that's such a loss for individuals and the organization when you just really don't fully utilize that. And that's where that book, It's Your Ship, really describes that well, and the success of transitioning from that top-down leadership to more of a servant, lead by example leadership.
I think when you think about, first of all, servant leadership, right? I mean, I think of things like assuming positive intent, seeking to understand, granted trust, accountability, and sense of ownership. Similar like what you just mentioned with that. What I've found is the more you're trusted, the more the sense of ownership will come with those types of things. And I've had to realize that that's not always a linear thing. It's not always something that's, or I realize that I have to grant, like coming in, I have to grant trust to my team and earn their trust, like you just mentioned. I think
Yeah.
the more we can grant that, the quicker the process. But I'm even finding too, like with creating that sense of ownership and allowing them to create things. Sometimes that might need structure with that versus just and some guidance to help increase confidence for trust and those types of things. It's not always a one size fits all, and I think that being adaptable to that because each team is different, right? So whether you're coming in as the fourth leader or the fifth leader in 3 years or 2 years, and there's always this evolution. Context matters and those types of things. But I'm curious, what's been your experience with that?
So I think it really comes down to learning agility and adaptability, because I think it is an individual thing, and each context you come into is different. Is it a
Yeah,
team that's gone now? They're on their sixth leader or manager, and they really need to be pulled together.
yeah,
And they're operating fine on their own, but to really become that rock star team you need to figure out what is it they need, what are the
yeah,
gaps, so that you can identify those gaps and then enable them, whether it's resources or whether it's even just education and mastery of their of their subject matter, or if it's empowering, where they've just really not been able to step up or given the ability to step up and lead cross-functionally at congresses. So, I think that's incredible. So to me, my mantra is this: enable,
Mm,
and empower and develop. And then you've got to figure out, where are they in development? Has anybody ever asked them what you want to be when you grow up?
yeah,
Right. And, and emphasizing that development's also part of developing in role. And so looking for those and identifying those opportunities, I
yeah,
think is key.
yeah.
Well,
Really
do
good.
you believe or have you ever seen, um, maybe an MSL who's sort of had a failure to thrive under multiple leaders and then under a different leadership style that all of a sudden they blossom? And do you think that that's like a leadership mismatch, or I don't know. I'm curious about that because I have seen people thrive under different leaders, and other leaders say, "Oh yeah, that person was a loser. I would never hire that person again." And I mean, I hate to be so crass, but I have heard it. Um, and have had other people say that they're one of the best MSLs they've ever had. I just love to get your perspective on that.
Oh, I think that definitely happens. The example I think of is actually from a former colleague of mine that was on the leadership team with me, and she came in and she was pretty much told, you need to figure out how to get this person off the team. They're negative energy, they're draining, and okay, here you need to do, you need to make this happen. And her first request was, "Can I have a little time in here to see if what I could do
Yeah,
here?" And sure enough, she was able to work with this individual MSL, and that MSL just thrived after that. So, and it was just she speaks, it just, you can tell how rewarding it was for her, because she helped that individual turn it around from an almost gone to, okay, now thriving in the role. So,
I imagine it made the MSL feel great too because
absolutely.
somebody was really working with them to develop them.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it goes back to one of the ways that you value individuals, and not just speaking to the group, but really taking time to invest. I mean, that sounds like that was an experience that you had, and can't the result or that experience rather is similar to that. It's truly understanding the needs of the individual and meeting where they are, and setting them up for success as much as can be, and not just accepting one perspective as gospel, if you will, with that. So yeah, I love that approach. So I want to shift a little bit to you've mentioned the V word multiple times, valued or values, principles, and things like that in your approach. If we can, let's dig into a little bit around values and non-negotiables. So thinking about that, there's different tough situations, but even from a grounding perspective, how do you do that regardless of the circumstance that you're presented with, whether it's um, pressure, you're getting ready for a launch, or things go wrong and haywire? Can you talk a little bit about how you're able to stay grounded in that based on the values and non-negotiables that you carry?
So for me, I think the honesty and transparency is critical, as well as being authentic. And so those are critical values, and just being personable. And so it really is that pausing and not letting, I mean, stepping away if there is a reaction. Let's use an example. You're working with a cross-functional partner, it's launch, everybody's under this high pressure. You don't know why that person is just really pushing, 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 not getting along well with their partners.
Yeah,
And the thing is to stop and think about what their story is. Stop to listen to them and consider, assume good intent,
yeah.
and try to figure out what it is that's driving them, and what's really got them that driven and aggressive towards others at that point. So,
And that makes me think of a Ted Lasso quote. Be
Oh,
curious, not judgmental.
yes, absolutely. It's such a good mantra. Always go in with curiosity.
Was
Absolutely.
that
I
the
love
Dart
that.
episode?
It was.
Okay. All right. That's one of the ones I do remember on that. So yeah, that was really an impactful statement.
And then he
With
said
that,
barbecue sauce.
I'm gonna have to trust you on that one, Mary.
Yeah, he did. He wasn't much for bad words.
Okay, fair enough.
Mm. Sorry, carry on.
No, it's your. I was going to pause and let you. I've been hogging the question, so go ahead.
I feel like I've been hogging it. So,
Well,
I'll-
that's normal
but
for you, but today is a little bit different. Go ahead.
oh,
I'm just giving you crap. Okay.
I know. So we were actually kind of touched on this a little bit ago about making the transition to being from being a peer to being a leader, and then some of the adjustments that come into play. So, like, how do you balance um, being a real human being and not crossing the friend line, like Chad was talking about? It is. I mean, you one of the things you were talking about with John Nielsen was he took the time to get to know everybody, but I guess you have to make sure you maintain that leadership structure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that's where the lead by example really comes in. That's if, especially like, let's say you're coming up from a peer, you've already been in on that team and they've seen how you operate and how you lead, continuing to do that and then staying true to yourself. Now, how do you separate that out? Because it's interesting. Once you see behind the curtain of folks that were formerly your peers, and you now find out, they think they're a rock star and always just doing really well. And now you've got accountability that you have to bring in because now we're all trying to hit our targets and our goals. And you really never even knew before that this amazing, best buddy has those challenge that this is something you're going to have to deal with. And
I
so
didn't think
that's
about
one
that.
of those. I like your get curious. I really like to ask a lot of questions. What's going on here? What do you need? What's missing? Are there resources? Is there something that where you don't feel enabled or don't feel empowered? Well, how can we get there? That thing. But to me, it is that I love the being curious because I like to. There was a challenge we had where it's ask as many questions as you can before you give a recommendation.
Hmm.
And so that helps folks come to these conclusions and these decisions on their own instead of it being, do this, you've got to do this now, and this is the way to do it. It's figuring out how to help them get there and find their own solutions.
Asking questions, yes. I think too, asking for permission in ways. I mean, to give that feedback, especially, or I think just reflecting back on transitioning from peer to leader, the times that I didn't ask for that permission, but I had constructive or things that are some issues that could be contentious or whatever, defensiveness actually was a result of the way that I posed a certain thing. And so I really like your approach about at least asking questions, and then that being now the thing with that, I think it's probably, or it is more beneficial to have that approach in the long run. But the thing that I think people struggle with is that takes time. It takes time and energy and investment into individuals. And I think that that's where a lot of leaders miss it, is because they don't really want to invest that time, or maybe they don't have maybe their schedule prohibits them from really investing in that. But that is the sometimes as trying to lead somebody to a destination versus telling them the expectation of being at a destination. It's so much from a long-term perspective. It's worth, to me, and it sounds like you would agree, it's worth taking that extra time to help somebody get there for the long run by taking that approach versus just being more authoritative, like you were mentioning earlier.
Absolutely. And those were some lessons learned too, as I went through it, because when I tried somebody else's approach, which wasn't my approach, okay, we're going to, this is what we need. this is what we need to do, or, why aren't we there? And I tried to be this different version of this more top line or more directive. Then that's where yeah, that just didn't go so well because it
Yeah.
wasn't well received. Now you've got somebody who's defensive. I've not asked permission. And it's like, who are you to be doing this, right? And so those are definitely those early lessons learned of how to approach it. And like you said, asking permission first, and then really figuring out how to handle it and approach it the way that is comfortable and natural for you is critical.
So, a couple more questions for you on this. When thinking about authenticity, I'm hogging this, Mary. Sorry, not
No,
sorry.
I think that was an awesome truth bomb she just dropped there.
Yeah.
That I think is such a good lesson for new leaders and experienced leaders is, you know, y- just because that suit jacket looks good on one person doesn't mean it's meant to fit on you. And so you don't have to lead like somebody else. You need to lead like yourself. That what's authentic and makes sense to you. I love that. I'm sorry.
Is that like fat guy in a little coat? From
Oh my gosh, Nicole used to use that expression.
oh, really? Okay.
Yes,
I miss Nicole.
me too.
Um,
Well, I kind of wanted to veer off from people leadership for a quick second,
okay.
direct people leadership, but into ways that you support your team from a cross-functional partnership perspective. Because what do we always say? Medical affairs leaderships are always having to demonstrate their value to your cross-functional partners. And one of the things that's interesting about your background um, is that you've worked in a lot of different capacities. I mean, not commercial, but a lot of other capacities where you would partner with people who have skill sets that you've probably worked around before. So, do you feel like that's helped you at all to develop some of these cross functional partnerships, like with clinical development or ClinOps, and strengthen relationships between your field team?
Oh, it's huge. It's essential. Absolutely. And the first thing is the communicate, communicate, communicate. That is critical. You've got to align on those roles and responsibilities, who's doing what, and that's one of those where I had to have really difficult conversations with some folks I was really close to in ClinOps or in GMA, and I had to do so on behalf of the team, so if the roles and responsibilities weren't clear, if there were some friction points, that's where on behalf of the team, I would talk to individuals and to have that conversation and ask, to not call that person out in the public setting, or, and please let me handle it. If there's issues, let me know. But that was critical. But for cross-functional collaborations are just critical in our industry. And whether right now, we're in that kind of pre-launch preparation phase, so it's so much involvement with commercial marketing, uh, and still also the clinical development and operations. But it's really that communicating, identifying roles and responsibilities, and aligning on what good and what great looks like, and
Mm.
keeping your eye on the goal. we're,
Yeah.
we're all working towards the same goal. We are one team working towards the same goal. So
All right. So, Melissa, when we're talking about the whole idea of being authentic and being present, you mentioned being vulnerable with your team, and I think that is a word that's often used for a core trait of leadership, of servant leadership. I think there's probably a struggle with understanding like what that looks like in practice as well too. So, um, if you wouldn't mind, or if you could think of maybe an example that you've been vulnerable with your team, just to share with our listeners, I think that would really be impactful to see how they could put that into practice. Does anything come to mind that you want to share?
it does, because I think back, I had a situation where an individual was challenged with a cross-functional partner. and was sharing with me. And of course, first I'm like, so are you just wanting to share with me the challenges? Do you want me to get involved? But I could totally relate to the position she was in because I'd been there myself. And so I shared that example where I had an individual who, like, we would just come, like, we didn't come to heads. I did well at not saying anything, but, have that visceral response
Mm,
when we had engagements and we had to engage a lot. And so I just shared with her that I understand having these difficult relationships and having to get along with others. And the best thing that one of my colleagues did was a phone call that said, pause, step back,
mm,
step out of the office today, take some time for yourself, come back when you're not going to react emotionally. Don't send any emails. Don't do anything,
um,
and then come back and then let's talk about how we, can move forward and work through this. And through my colleagues' help, then I actually ended up never coming heads to head with this individual who I was having a struggle with. We learned, I considered, what does this person need? Why are they asking for so much more that clearly we're doing? And it was communication. So this person really needed a lot of communication so that they knew what
mm,
was going on, and also building that trust and confidence and that things were getting done. And once we made it progress towards that trust and confidence, then we were able to work through it and have success together. So that's where I'm able to share, like, a vulnerable story of what was tough for me. I'm human. We're all
mm.
human, and there's certain times, certain people that just kind of rub you the wrong way, and that's fine. But then how you respond and handle that from there is really huge. And that's how you avoid any career ending moves or
Yeah.
anything that's going to break down those collaborative, the collaboration that's so essential for cross functional
So
engagement.
great example. You said something before that, before you set up the example, that I think is important for our listeners to hear as well too. It was not part of the question, but it was how you responded to that challenge. Right? You asked, "Is this something that are you wanting? Are you wanting me just to listen, or are you wanting me to give feedback?" Right? I mean, good night. Have I learned that over the years of being married? Trying to solve and fix things, or am I supposed to listen? I still struggle with it, in full disclosure, but I think that's so good. It's like, how can I serve you in this particular environment? So keeping that at the forefront. So really, thank you for sharing that. Now, the follow up question of this is, how do you maintain authenticity and be vulnerable without oversharing or losing authority? I think that's a struggle that I've not mastered. If I'm being honest, still to this day, it's something I struggle with. I want to. What you see is what you get, and that's one of the values that I hold. But I think there is this balance, and so I would love to learn from you ways that you've learned to kind of navigate that.
Oh, you hit on a tough one. That's certainly a challenge for all of us, I can imagine. So, yeah, that's a very tough one. And I think it's a matter of really how much you are sharing. Like, are you, keeping certain things? Certainly never sharing anything about anybody else on the team or anything you're dealing with, of
Yeah.
course. I know you wouldn't do that, but not doing that, but also then kind of just how much, like, personal you're sharing. It's one thing to come along and we're sharing professionally, we're working through things, we're talking about families and all that. But then it's just kind of how far do you go? And there's a good example. One of my former leaders was like, now you don't go down to the bar with the team and you let the team come together and have their time in the evenings and things like that. So kind of stepping away at certain times to kind of have that separation. But I'm super, super excited to hear more as we can have future conversations as we all continue to grow in this area, no
Yeah,
doubt.
it's not a one size fit all. It's those, I think, I mean, one of the things that I was just even reflecting on is, we talk about I talk about one of the core traits of an MSL is curiosity. And even as you step into leadership to maintain that curiosity, I think what you're talking about is, I think being curious in every aspect of things is important. What, like, to your point of the example of being vulnerable earlier, like, why is this person responding? Not that you would necessarily ask that question to the person, but you stop and pull yourself out of the situation, the emotion, and like, what's driving this behavior? What may impact it? Because that will help you more long term versus trying to put out fire after fire after fire. So for me, it's just, how can I be curious in all the different, not only just learning about people, but even understanding what's driving the behavior, I think is really important from a leadership perspective. So this has been really good. I think as we get ready to as we start to wrap up our conversation, this is another thought-provoking question around leadership and what you see it as. So do you see leadership, and maybe this has evolved over the years too, do you see leadership more as influence, service, or direction?
Each. I would say
Nope, nope,
each.
nope, nope, no.
Oh,
No,
no.
no,
Okay.
no,
I'll
no, no.
go with me first. I
Or
will go
can we
first.
wait? Can we wait? Or wait them. I just would love to hear kind of like how the interplay between those.
All right, I'll call out one. So I think leadership first and foremost is service, and that's where you earn the influence, and that's where you can use that influence to set a clear and shared direction. So it's timing and situation, but service first. So I'll
I
call
love
one. I'll
it.
vote on one.
I
So,
love it. No, I think that that's exactly you. I mean, it's an active leadership model that you're showing, and everything is a consequence of that action as well too, right? So I would agree with you. I think services would probably be the ultimate driver of those others from a sustaining standpoint. The service has to remain. So I'm aligned. I was just curious. That's a tough question to pick one, and it's really difficult to do because they all interplay. So thanks for playing with that particular thing and having to pick one. I love the answer of how you did. So really good stuff, Melissa. As we wrap things up, I know you gave the key takeaways, but is there anything that you want to leave our listeners with? You talked about enabling them, empowering them, developing to thrive, and making your team most successful.
so won't reiterate what you just said, but absolutely that. Also that being the leader that aligns with your values and your principles. I do believe that's key if you don't stay true to yourself, and what you believe. And really impactful leaders have a lasting impression and impact on others. And so how amazing if each of us, 30 years from now could hear back from this, legacy of MSLs or leaders who were impacted and we had no idea. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden you get that email that says, "Thank you. I'm at Harvard now. This is
Oh my gosh,
amazing. And it's all
that's so
because I was
special.
in your lab one summer," that kind of thing. So
It's a ripple effect. You're trying to, or what kind of ripple effect can you have? Really, really good encouragement with that. I think, yeah, you never know the impact and the downstream effect that you're going to have and the opportunity that you have. I think for me, the takeaway from what you just said is, number one, if you haven't asked this question yet, what are your principles? What are your non-negotiables? What drives you to your core? And then how can you pull those through, and how are those being pulled through in your leadership style and how you're serving others? I think for aspiring leaders as well too, what's your why for wanting to even become a leader as well too? And if it's because you're bored in your job and you want to do something else, or is it because you really want to be able to pull those things through on your core beliefs and your passions and things like that? Like Melissa so very articulately has described today. Melissa, I've learned a lot from you in our conversation this short hour. So really appreciate you taking time and joining us for our conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so pleasurable to just chat with you and share and learn from you as well. So that's been amazing. Hopefully we get to meet in person in the near future.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Listeners, thanks so much for joining us for another episode, casual conversation on leadership. Remember that leaders don't develop in isolation. Leaders learn from leaders, and that's our mission here at MSL Lead Chronicles. So be sure to follow us on LinkedIn, to like this podcast, subscribe, and share with others as well too. Until next time, lead well.